Okay. So welcome everyone to our virtual speaker series, the very first one of 2024 from the Philip J. Currie Dinosaur Museum. My name is Emily Banforth. I'm the curator here at the Currie Museum. And we are delighted today to welcome Dr. Kirstin Brink, who is an assistant professor at the University of Manitoba and is also the adjunct curator at the Canadian Fossil Discovery Centre in Brandon, Manitoba. So Kirstin is going to be speaking to us today about T-Rexes and some of the nasty things that can happen to their teeth. If you are watching on YouTube, there is a place where you can type comments in the chat, and we will address those at the end of the talk. So with that, I would like to invite Kirstin to take it away for us.
Great. Thank you very much for that introduction, Emily. I'm very happy to speak to you all today. So I will be talking about Tyrannosaurus rex, probably one of the most iconic dinosaurs ever known. And I think actually we know more about T-Rex. There's more studies done on this animal than on a lot of living animals. So it's just such a captivating beast to try and reconstruct, what did it used to look like and how did it used to live? So today I'll be focusing on one T-Rex in particular. And this one is nicknamed Sue, the T-Rex. It was found in 1990, and I've seen some different numbers for how complete it was, but it was about 70 or more percent complete, which was really amazing. There was a lot of controversy and disputes over who actually owned the specimen, whether it was the landowners or the people who collected it. And it ended up being auctioned off in 1997 and sold for about 8.4 million. So at the time it went to auction, a lot of paleontologists were super nervous because it was such a complete specimen. They were worried it would end up in a private collection somewhere and nobody would ever be able to study it. But luckily, the Field Museum in Chicago was able to purchase it with the help from some other contributors. I think McDonald's helped and Disney helped to purchase the skeleton. So they brought the bones to Chicago, prepared a bunch of the skeleton, and opened this amazing exhibit in the year 2000. So these are some pictures of what the specimen looks like. So on the very left here, we have a reconstruction of what the skeleton looks like when it first opened in 2000. And in the past couple of years, they've actually redone the exhibit and moved Sue upstairs and added in a bunch of new bones. So if you can see, there's a bunch of ribs around the belly area that were added in, and they changed the posture a little bit. And the skull is actually in a separate case, and it's in this own little glass enclosure. And for anybody who wants to come study it, they can just take the lid and slide the skull out of the case. And there's a picture of me working on it back in 2016. So as a part of this exhibit, they did a really nice fleshed out reconstruction of Sue. And then there's a picture on the right of Sue up in its new exhibit on the second floor. It's really dramatic and a very exciting exhibit. If you're ever in Chicago, I highly recommend going and taking a look at this very cool specimen. So there's some other reasons why Sue is so intriguing is it has a lot of weird pathologies all over the skeleton. So the two images on the left here are some of the ribs, and I've used yellow arrows to point out some weird bone growths. So it looked like maybe some of the ribs were broken and healed, or they had some kind of a tumor growth inside of them or an infection. The same thing we can see along some of the vertebrae in the picture on the right. Some other sort of weird bone lesions are happening in the vertebrae. If we take a look at the skull, we'll focus in on this lower part of the jaw. You can see these little holes there. We'll zoom in on those. They're actually not that little, they're actually quite large. And these holes are very peculiar, and a lot of people have tried to figure out what they are and why they're there. So here is a picture on the top left. The letters in pink indicate some holes that are supposed to be there. And then the numbers in yellow are holes that are not supposed to be there. And if we zoom in, we can see there's some healed bone margin around these big holes, and there's little bone spurs inside these holes. So there was a PhD student back in 2009 did a little survey of what these might be and found that they actually occur in a number of different Tyrannosaurus specimens right at the back of the jaw. So these are pictures indicating some of the holes in the jaw. They're always in this kind of, more posterior part of the jaw. And he compared it to similar types of lesions or holes that are found in living animals and suggested that it was probably caused by a disease, trichomoniasis, which is an infection that occurs frequently in the jaws of birds. There's a picture of a bird right here that has this infection. And it actually can get so bad that it causes these holes to form within the jaw. So his idea was that, well, because birds and dinosaurs are very closely related, that perhaps this disease that mostly affects birds is also affecting dinosaurs. And this is what's causing all these painful holes in the back of the jaw. And there's a reconstruction of what it looked like when this was first published. So there's a picture of the skull on the bottom and then some of those lesions developing inside the mouth that are actually creating these holes that pierce through almost to the outside of the jaw. But Wolf wasn't the first. Wolf and colleagues were not the first people just to have a look at what might be causing these holes. There was a hypothesis put forward back in 2001 that it might actually be a different kind of disease called actinomycosis, which is a different bacterial infection that mostly affects cattle, and it causes these really weird bone growths and holes in the bone. So I have a picture here of a normal cow jaw at the top and then a jaw that was infected by the actinomycosis on the bottom. So we can see there's some similarities in terms of these big holes and some of the bone that's regrowing inside of it. They look kind of similar to the holes that we're seeing in Sioux. And then there are other authors who completely disagree with the idea that it is some sort of infection. So here's a picture of a T-Rex skull with one of these holes in it. And this author, Bruce Rothschild's, put a tooth inside the hole. And he said, look, the tooth fits perfectly in there. These are probably bite marks. And this is a very intriguing idea. Like, oh, okay, so another animal bit this T-Rex and made a hole in it. But I mean, I could put anything inside this hole. I could put a banana in there and say, oh, a banana caused these holes in a T-Rex. So we need a little bit more evidence. And this is this is more intriguing. So as a part of that biting into the bone, one of the effects would be the healing, which causes the little bone spurs, which I pointed out down on this bottom left picture here. And this is very reminiscent of bone healing in human skulls who have undergone trepanation. So this is when a hole is kind of hammered into the skull in order to relieve some pressure on the brain. And then once that starts to heal, we get these little bone spurs that grow in. And if we do like a side-by-side comparison of the on the left and A and C, we have these bone spurs growing in a T-Rex. And then on B and D, those are some of the bone spurs growing back in a human skull. So it looks like, you know, very similar just by looking at the appearance. It looks like maybe it is caused by some kind of bite mark or some other kind of blunt force that created this hole in the side of the jaw. So when I was doing my postdoc at the University of British Columbia, I was called up out of the blue one day by this person in the middle of the picture right here, Denise Merman. And she's a forensic dentist. And she was like, I was at the Field Museum, she's from Chicago, and I saw these holes and I just really curious about them. I really want to put together a team that we can try to figure out what's actually going on, if we can narrow it down to being a summit disease or if it's actually a bite mark. So Denise assembled this team, included a veterinarian, we have Tom Meehan, an anthropologist who works on human forensics, Aaron Waxenbaum. Ansh at the time was a postdoc at MIT, so he was the 3D modeler on the team. And we all got to get together in Chicago and have a look at some of the, have a look at the bones and try to collect some more data. And this was back in 2016. So what Ansh was doing was taking measurements. So we did kind of almost like a crime scene investigation kind of thing, where we put pieces of paper into the holes to see the directionality. Assuming that it was bite marks, perhaps they all had the same directionality if the dinosaur biting it, the teeth are assumed to be all pointing in the same direction. So maybe we can find some evidence for bite marks that way. And Denise was collecting some data the same way that she would do for some of her forensic dental calls that she has to do by using some of this putty, so we can get a copy of the bone surface. We can be able to study it with a microscope back in the lab. And then at the time, some of the newest technologies, this is, remember, 2016, was to use an Xbox Kinect as a 3D scanner. And this was actually part of Ansh's research at the time. So he brought an Xbox Kinect unit, and he and Denise were making scans of the skull so we could get a 3D copy of it in order to do some more analyses in the background. So this is what they were doing as a part of the team. So you can see it, the scan appears live on that big TV that we had brought down into the gallery. So we could see the model being made in real time. You can see Denise is holding the little Xbox Kinect right there. So while they were doing that, I was brought in as a person who knows stuff about teeth. I love teeth. That's a big part of my research program. So I was focusing in on the teeth while they were making the 3D scans. And here's a picture of Sue's jaw with my hand for scale. The teeth are just gigantic. And they're also beautiful. They're really nicely preserved. I have a close-up picture on the right here. You can see all those little bumps running from the top to the bottom of the tooth. Those are the denticles. And Tyrannosaurus rex teeth are zyphodont. So it means they're a little bit laterally compressed, although kind of cone-shaped. And they have these serrations or denticles running all the way around the tooth. And they would kind of act like a steak knife. So to help the dinosaur bite through whatever prey that it was trying to eat. So I was taking a look at all these teeth and doing some measurements. I was looking up at the bone inside the skull. And the collections manager, Bill Simpson, came over and he's like, did you know that there's a couple of really weird, kind of messed up pathologic teeth that are associated with the skull? And I said, oh, really? Ooh, that's cool. Can I see them? So he brought them out into the gallery. So I was, here's what they look like right here on the right. And I just started, taking some pictures of them, having a closer look at them, doing some measurements just right out there in the gallery. And I was like, this is very, very intriguing. And my mind started to race it. And like, so we're here trying to figure out if it was a disease or some kind of infection that caused these weird holes in the back of the jaw, or if it was some kind of a bite force, biting incident that created these holes. And I was like, wonder if these teeth could help us try to figure out this problem. So the question I started to think about at that time was, did an infection cause these tooth pathologies? So the way to try and tackle this, I take three main paths of investigation. And the first is to characterize the pathology. So what does it actually look like? What's going on with the tooth? Next, I'm going to compare it to some other animals to see if we have any other teeth that are kind of weird and messed up in that same way. And then we'll think about it back considering dinosaur biology. So we'll try to put the whole thing together and see what's going on. So let's have a closer look at these funny little teeth. So before we do that, let's talk a little bit about how teeth form. So dinosaurs have lifelong tooth replacement. So this means that they'll have a set of teeth in the mouth, and there's always little baby teeth that are waiting underneath the gums to replace those functional teeth. And this isn't just a character that is unique to dinosaurs. Crocodiles do it, snakes, frogs that have teeth just on the front of their mouths are able to replace their teeth. And the ancient ancestors of turtles had teeth. They would replace their teeth. Ancient ancestors of birds replace their teeth. And then other lizards, fish, and then probably another really good example of that is sharks, where you can actually, if you look in the mouth of a shark, you can see all those replacement teeth that are kind of waiting in the wings to replace those functional teeth. So how this works, I'll draw a little cartoon for you of how this lifelong tooth replacement works. So the top of this pink area, it would be inside the mouth. And then below this pink line would be what's happening underneath the gums. So when a tooth first starts to develop, there's a series of soft tissues, this gray, blue, and yellow tissue that will bend and fold and multiply in order to create the shape of that tooth. So for these 3 stages, we can see that what the shape of that tooth is going to look like, but all the tissue is still soft at this stage. And then once that shape is determined by those soft tissues, those hard tissues, the enamel and the dentine, will start to mineralize, and they'll harden below the gum line before they erupt into the mouth. And this last picture here shows that tooth erupting into the mouth. So while that functional tooth is erupting, there's this gray piece of tissue called the dental lamina. And at the tip of that tissue, another replacement tooth will start to form. So the same thing, those soft tissues will fold to form the shape of the tooth, and then it'll erupt into the mouth once the functional tooth falls out. Okay, so keep that in mind. That shape of the tooth has to form when it's still underneath the gums in that soft tissue stage. Okay, so let's have a look. Here is the first tooth. I made a little, I had some colleagues who are at the Field Museum do some CT scans of the tooth so we can get a 3D model of it. So that sort of dusty stuff in the middle is some sediment that was still inside the tooth. But you can see, yeah, the tip of it is all bent and weird. You can see some of those denticles along the front and the back, and then it just looks kind of, there's these weird ridges running all the way down the tooth. And these teeth are very small, so they didn't have a big root on them yet. So it's likely they were still underneath the gums and had not erupted at the time that they were preserved in the fossil record. So take a look at some of these still images. So the crown, the pointy part of the tooth, is at the bottom. And we'll zoom in, you can see there are those denticles running all around the front and back of the tooth, but they're kind of weird and they're kind of messed up. They don't look as nice and linear as we would expect in a normal tooth. On the other side of the tooth, you can see they're kind of all crunched in and folded in into that folded part of the tooth. There's an edit from another angle. So those denticles are still there. They're just all folded up and even like running along this crease toward the right side of the screen. There's some holes in there, but those denticles are still there. Okay, and then there's another tooth, the second tooth, which is actually the second and third tooth. So if you look, there's these 2 lumps, and this is actually 2 teeth that are stuck together. You see those denticles running around on the front and back of the tooth, and that other short little tooth stuck to it right there. And I'll show you some screenshots. So where the yellow arrow is pointing to is like a area of fusion between those 2 teeth. So the little tooth on the left and the bigger tooth on the right. And if you change the angle a bit, you can see those are actually some denticles from the smaller tooth, but they're just all smeared up against the bigger tooth. So very strange shapes there. The tip of the bigger tooth, it almost looks like, it always reminds me of a piece of like chewing gum or taffy that was like squished or pulled apart and squished back together again. That makes those funny wrinkles in there. And then you can just try to look at where the denticles are supposed to be. They look sort of nice towards the right side of the screen. There's this big hole here. And then moving more towards the left side of the screen, those denticles kind of disappear. So there's something kind of weird going on with the denticles there. And then we have these other random denticles that appear kind of on the side of the tooth where we would never expect them to be in a normal tooth. So that's also very bizarre. So there's a lot of things going on here. We have teeth fused together. We have extra denticles where they shouldn't be. We have malformed denticles. And these are a lot of things that we've never really seen in any other pathologic tooth before, which is very cool. So this is especially apparent when we try to compare it to other animals. So the first place I looked in this comparison was to humans. We know a lot about human tooth development just because of dentistry, and then we have to keep our teeth healthy. We don't have endless replacement teeth in our mouths, unfortunately. So here's a picture of a few children's skulls, so probably between 6 to 8 years old. And if you can see all of the functional teeth in the mouth, and then some of the bone has been scraped away, so you can see all those little baby teeth that are still developing underneath the gums. And eventually all those teeth, the functional teeth, will fall out, and then the adult teeth will grow in, and then that's it. We don't have any other teeth. So if we're trying to find a pathology in these, you have to really look in very young people. So I found one example of a little toddler about 14 months old, who fell over and knocked one of the baby teeth up into its gums. So you can see in picture A there that tooth is, you can't really see it anymore. But in B, in the x-ray, you can see that the little baby tooth has been jammed up into the adult tooth. So at this stage, at 14 months, the adult teeth are already present in the mouth, but they're not fully mineralized yet. Some of that enamel is probably still growing on the tooth. So they, I think we're able to just leave that tooth in there. And then eventually that baby tooth fell out, and then the adult tooth grew in when the kid was 7 years old. And you can see that that tooth has a weird shape now. So because that little baby tooth was jammed up into it, the adult tooth got kind of the shape of that tooth changed. So that was one example that I could find in human dentistry for a tooth being malformed because of some kind of trauma that happened to the baby teeth. You can also find evidence of fusion in human teeth, which I think is super cool. So the tooth has two separate roots, but the crown is actually fused together. And this also happens really, really early in development when the person's still a baby and those teeth are just starting to mineralize and they actually fuse together. That's very cool. So that's, yeah, I just think that's pretty cool. And then if we look outside of humans, I found some really cool examples of tooth deformities in sharks that were caused by injuries. So there's the picture on the left where I have the arrow that says split. So that was a deformed third tooth and a fourth lateral split tooth. So it was an old jaw injury, that the injury was deep enough into the soft tissue that actually caused that little developing tooth to split in half. We also get examples of fused teeth like that in the top right image B. Image A, we have normal tooth A, and then tooth B, the tip of the tooth is just a little bit bent. So something happened when it was mineralizing to cause it to kind of bend in a funny way. Tooth in image C on the bottom right here, we have a tooth that was sort of squished down a little bit while it was developing, so it doesn't have that normal triangular shape. And then this one's really cool. The image D, there's a big hole in tooth A. That was because this shark was, I don't know if it tried to bite through a stingray, and like a stingray barb actually went through the jaw. And that tooth started to grow around that stingray barb when it was still in the mouth. So very cool examples of tooth deformities caused by injuries. And then we also find some examples of this in reptiles, which is cool. So on the top here, I have a picture of an iguana skull. We're looking into the roof of the mouth right here. And these are the teeth of the upper jaw of the maxilla that's upside down. We can see that they're all nice in a row. There's a couple of missing teeth here. That's normal. That's part of the replacement pattern. And there's these little triangles that you can see in some of the tooth positions. Those are little baby teeth that are developing. And eventually those will get big enough that they will erupt into the mouth and become the functional teeth. So the top picture is normal. That's like what a healthy individual would look like. But on the bottom, this is an iguana skull that is also at the Field Museum. The teeth are all sort of messed up. And it said on the tag with the skeleton that this iguana had been sick when it died. So I don't know what the soft tissue looked like that would have caused their teeth to form in such a funny way. They're all kind of curved. Some of them are sort of stuck together or stacked on top of each other. So I know that we can see these malformed teeth in lizards. I'm just not entirely sure what caused it in this case. And then, oh yeah, this is some late breaking news. This was my colleague, Caleb Brown at the Tyrrell Museum, sent me this photo yesterday. He'd been going through the collections and came across, this is a kind of gnarly curled up tooth from a duck-billed dinosaur. And it was just sitting in a vial all by itself. So we don't know what caused this either. But I can see some similarities in kind of the way the tooth is curved and some of the sort of, I would call them stretch marks on the tooth are very similar to what we see in this T-Rex tooth. So this is another cool example of a similar sort of pathology or deformity in a duck-billed dinosaur tooth. Okay, so let's think about dinosaur biology for a bit. There have been, once again, here's my colleague Caleb Brown. He did a really cool study back in 2021 documenting the amount of face biting that occurs in Tyrannosaurs. So this is an image of two juvenile gorgosaurs fighting each other. and then an adult on the right-hand side, an older adult. So what Caleb found is that there's lots and lots and lots of evidence that theropod dinosaurs are biting each other on the face, and whether it's for, they're face biting for, I don't know, if they're playing or they're fighting, or trying to fight over mates or something like that. We don't know the cause of it, but we do have lots of fossil material with evidence of bites and scratch marks all over the faces. This is a composite image from that study, and the blue marks are the circular to oval bite marks, and we do see some on the specimens towards the back of the jaw, but for the most part, all the action kind of takes place at the front of the face or in the bottom of that lower jaw is where a lot of those bite marks occur. So if you try to think of these two dinosaurs biting each other, it kind of makes more sense that they're going to bite, more towards the bottom of the throat or more on the tip of the snout. And it's actually kind of hard to bite that far back on the jaw. You can also think about the study that I was a part of that came out just last year, looking at how do we actually reconstruct the soft tissue of a dinosaur when we don't have a lot of good evidence for what they used to look like in life in terms of soft tissue preservations. We have to look at other correlates within the bones and teeth to figure this out. So we, using several different lines of evidence, we concluded that it was most likely that theropod dinosaurs, including T-Rex, had some kind of a scaly lip covering their teeth, similar to lizards today. And this is really important when we're thinking about these tooth pathologies. So if, with the previous reconstructions where the teeth were always exposed to the open air, we might expect the enamel to look differently. We might expect there to be more wear and tear on the teeth because they're exposed to the open environment. But like I showed you that picture from the beginning of the talk, the normal teeth are really gorgeous. They're very beautifully preserved, which means they're probably really healthy during the life of the animal, and they probably had this soft tissue covering the teeth. So when we're working in this enclosed system, it can kind of change the way we interpret, how or if an animal was getting bit on the jaw, how would it puncture through all that soft tissue in order to make a hole in the bone? Or if there is an infection inside the mouth, how is it getting through all that soft tissue, or what's going on to the soft tissue that could be causing these holes in the back of the jaw, or be causing these teeth to become developed in such a weird way? So I'll put all three of these together. We have what the tooth looks like, we have examples in other animals, and then considering dinosaur biology. This is my hypothesis for what I think is going on. So when I was in Chicago back in 2016, I was trying to get kind of underneath the skull to look up and see if there were any empty tooth sockets that where these two little teeth might have come from. So these pictures here, I'm actually like trying to get my head up inside the skull and take some pictures, but the metal armature that is there to support the skull is a little bit in the way, but I was able to see inside all of the teeth, whether or not I could actually get a good picture of it or not. And there were little teeth inside, little replacement teeth, if the functional tooth was missing, inside almost all of those holes. Also, when the specimen was first found, they put it through an industrial CT scanner. So this was even before any of the rock was removed from it. They just put it in a jacket, put it straight into that scanner. And looking through those scans, I was able to find two empty tooth sockets where these two messed up teeth likely came from. So some of the sockets are filled in with little baby teeth, and some of them are filled in with some sediment. So I think it's likely that these two teeth came from the very back of the jaw. Okay, that's good. So if we kind of draw a line here where the end of the tooth row ends and where that soft fleshy tissue of the cheek would start, and also where those holes in the back of the jaw start, that's right about where that white line is right there. And if we think about how much of that soft tissue would actually be there, if we look at the reconstruction of Sue in the lobby of the Field Museum, there's a lot of soft tissue there that where that if there was an infection that could kind of take over all of that soft tissue. And if we look at this infection, the next picture is a little bit gross. This is some pictures of those birds with the trichomoniasis. And the infection, that like when birds have an infection, the pus that they produce is actually quite hard. It's very waxy. So it's firm. It's not like soft, like the pus that mammals get when they have some kind of an infection. And then even if this isn't the type of infection that might have been present in the T-Rex, the actinomycosis that affects cattle can also have weird effects on the teeth. So the picture on the left there's some weird brown staining. It looks like some forking shapes into the teeth. The teeth are worn down in a weird way because of this infection. And then the picture in the middle there, you can see the teeth are all kind of sticking out at weird angles because of the infected gum tissue. So we know that these two previous hypothesized diseases that would cause these holes in the jaw can also have a weird effect on the teeth. And then looking at what types of diseases can occur in lizards and other reptiles, there is crockpox that affects crocodiles, especially farmed crocodiles. They can get herpes viruses. They can get abscesses that will affect the teeth. Stomatitis, lots of tumors that can affect the teeth, and mouth rot. But I was having a hard time just combing through the literature, trying to find what effect these tumors or these abscesses or whatever have on the teeth. And I found like one quote saying that there's anecdotal evidence that it is bad for these reptiles. So I still don't have really good evidence of or good data, I guess, for what these types of diseases have on the teeth in reptiles. But so what I think is happening, and what I think I can find data in a living reptile to try and show. Here's that diagram once again that shows how a reptile tooth develops. So we have the mouth at the top and the gums at the bottom. And that shape of the tooth has to form to the left of this dotted line when everything is still soft. So if we have some weird disruption to the gum tissue, if we have some of that waxy material like the birds have, that waxy pus, it could actually be bending all those soft tissues in a weird way, or could be blocking the normal path of eruption for that tooth. And the tooth is actually getting all bent and weirdly formed while it's still underneath the gums. So this is what I think is happening in order for that tooth to just look so weird the way it is. Here's a picture of those teeth again. So this is my working hypothesis. This is a weird developmental thing that happened because something was going on inside the soft tissue of the mouth. So in order to better support this hypothesis, I need to find some more examples in living reptiles. So I'm reaching out to some vets to see if I can try and find some data on some poor sick pet lizards out there. And I would also be really great to see if we can find some more of these weird teeth in other T-Rex specimens that have the holes in the back of the jaw. So I'm not sure if anybody's looked at that yet either. So this is still ongoing work. It's a very long-running project, but there's still some work to be done in order to try to figure out what's going on with these teeth and those holes at the back of the jaw. But what can we say at this point? The evidence, I'm leaning more towards that there's some kind of infection in the mouth that's affecting those soft tissues and causing the teeth to form in such a weird way. We're seeing some really cool new examples of fusion and deformation in the teeth of dinosaurs that we've never seen before, especially in other living or extinct animals. And it's also caused by an infection that happens later in life. So like I showed you with the human examples, if we're looking for examples of deformities in the teeth, it always has to be in a very young individual. But in this T-Rex, is a much older animal. We're seeing these deformities develop in an older individual in the teeth. And overall, we're getting some really cool insights into the paleoecology of extinct animals, and especially into Tyrannosaurus rex. Thank you very much for listening.
All right, thank you so much, Kirstin. That was an absolutely fascinating talk. Well, some of your like gruesome slides of bird pathologies in their mouth.
Yeah.
So just again, if you're watching on YouTube right now, if you have a question, you can just pop it into the chat there and we'll get it to Kirstin. I have a question to get us started here. So one of the theories about T-Rex, and I'm not sure how established this is, but was that T-Rexes and other like theropods might have had what they call a septic bite. And so like bacteria could get caught in those serrations and basically infect their prey. So if that is true, could that contribute to more oral pathologies, potentially.
Yeah, no, I think if that is true, it absolutely would. Just having that extra bacteria in the mouth is probably a bad thing. But I think so. Originally, that idea came from observing Komodo dragons or varanid lizards in the wild, and they would bite their prey and then just kind of hang out and wait for it to die. And then their prey would die, and they'd go back later and eat it. And then there was a study within the past 5 years or so that shows that Komodo dragons actually have venom inside, like hidden right upside under their gums. So they're actually using venom to subdue their prey. They're not using bacterial infection inside their teeth to do it. So, and I don't think we have any evidence that Tyrannosaurus had any venom, but yeah, that would be really interesting if we could figure that out.
That would be really cool. That might be a game changer.
Oh yeah.
So this question from Trevor. What do you think is causing the supernumerary denticle formation?
Yes, that is a question I have no clue. I would love to figure that out. So I've been doing a little bit of molecular and genetic work on reptile teeth to try to understand how cusps form normally. So that is ongoing work. So I don't have an answer yet, but I think it is something going on. It just so there's like certain cells that will dictate the shape of the tooth, and there's something going on with those cells to tell it to make extra denticles where they shouldn't be.
Another question here. What do you think the bent tooth in the hadrosaur could be caused by? Also by similar infection question.
Yeah, that's I just saw that picture for the first time yesterday, so I was thinking about it a little bit last night. Like I don't know, because the duckbills are weird because all of their teeth are stuck together in these massive dental batteries with hundreds of teeth. So it's supported on both sides usually by other teeth. So if there was some kind of weird infection in there, you would probably expect all the other teeth around it to be maybe weirdly shaped as well. Or if there was something blocking the formation of that tooth, like another broken tooth was in the way and it kind of got jammed up in there, maybe. So I can come up with a lot of scenarios, but because it's only one tooth and it's not in the jaw anymore, it's really hard to say. But it's still worth taking a look at, I think. So next time I'm at the museum, I'm going to have a look at that.
Interesting. Sorry, another question, and I'm blanking on it now. Yeah, it might come back to me.
No worries.
And you mentioned the shark pathology. So presumably those pathologies in sharks would be different than in other more derived vertebrates, but it seems to have the same kind of formation in the jaw.
Yeah, I mean, shark teeth the tissues are basically the same as the tissues that we have in other vertebrates. So dentine, they have enameloid instead of enamel. But the way the teeth form are the same in basically every vertebrate. So I think it would also have to be that those weird pathologies in the hole and stuff that still have to be formed when the tooth is still in its soft, squishy state before any mineralization starts.
Yep, cool. Another question from Trevor here, and I think you mentioned this, but it's were the associated pathologic teeth from Sue herself?
So they were found outside of the skull. So in the same quarry, I don't know, I haven't seen a quarry map, so I don't know how far away they were from the skull, but they were found not inside the skull anymore. They were with the skull.
So, but presumably from the skull then, if there were no other differences in the vicinity.
Yeah.
Would you find similar teeth pathology on other theropods like allosaurids linked with jaw injuries?
Yeah, if these weird teeth are being caused by some kind of injury, then you would probably see it in other dinosaurs. But I can't think of any examples off the top of my head where I've seen any teeth look like this. So if you have, please reach out and let me know.
I have another question too. Do you think that this pathology might have killed Sue? She is already
Yeah.
a fairly elderly dinosaur.
Yeah. So I think when the first paper came out that was talking about the trichomanosis and these big waxy growths that so in living birds, this trichomanosis will kill them. because their throat gets so full of all that waxy stuff that they can't breathe, or well, I think they can't eat and drink anymore. So if this was the same case in Sioux, it could be very likely that it closed off the throat and they're no longer able to eat or drink.
So I guess a similar question too is this pathology that would affect more elderly animals potentially?
It's a great question. I don't know. I don't know if it's age specific in birds or not. I think it's just if they eat something that's contaminated, they can get it. So I'm guessing birds of all ages can get it, but I don't know for sure. So I don't know if this would be specific to an older dinosaur or not. Because I mean, they start to replace their teeth, almost as soon as they hatch. So I'm presumably it could happen at any time.
Mm-hmm. Pretty nasty. Looks like a
Oh, yeah, I know.
nasty thing
Yeah,
to get.
yeah, yeah.
All right, so I am not seeing any of the other questions.
Okay.
So just thanks again so much for your very interesting talk. We will have this talk posted on our YouTube channel in the virtual speaker series for 2024. So you can come back and take a look at it again. And of course, you can find Kirstin online. All of her
Yep.
contact information will be there as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so thanks again for watching. We'll hope you'll join us in February for our talk from Ashley Hall at the uh, sorry, blanking on where she's from.
Oh, the Museum of the Rockies.
MOR.
Yeah.
Yes. And she'll be talking to us about some of the paleontological outreach that the Museum of the Rockies is doing. So hope you'll join us for that. And we just want to thank Kirstin again for her time and for her excellent presentation. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.